Most amateur music producers are focusing on the wrong things. And in this video, I'm gonna show you what actually makes the biggest difference in my own music. These are not hacks, these are not even tips. I'm sharing with you the philosophy that I follow that allows me to produce professional quality music. And number 7 might just surprise you. So let's not even waste a second and get started. Number 1, I've learned that creative vision is the most important step in producing a song. My team and I just hosted a live event in Phoenix where we got to give hands-on help with a small number of music producers, and they got to make music every single day with different music challenges that we gave them. And one thing my business partner Andrew and I noticed immediately was that each group struggled in the beginning on that first day pretty hard. By the time lunch came around, most of the groups had not made significant progress on their songs, and in many ways, they were getting too caught up in the weeds and the details right at the beginning. They were trying to get the perfect chord progression, or trying to find that one cool sound, or trying to do any number of things that really didn't actually move the needle forward. And what this really comes down to is a lack of creative vision. This whole experience taught me even more viscerally than ever that most amateur producers really struggle with creative vision. Andrew and I also both got quite a bit of a kick out of it because we saw a lot of ourselves in this, because that's what we used to do. I would get sucked in the weeds of things that in the beginning really didn't matter that much, rather than getting really focused on having a great creative vision. Creative vision is like a map. It helps give direction so we know where we're going to begin with. This means that you need to have an idea of what you want to do before you go do it. Now that can look like a lot of different things, but the most practical is to get references together before you ever start. So many people talk about referencing during the mix process, but they never talk about referencing during the production process. And you need to do this even for production. This helps give something very specific to look at. For me, when I'm working with clients, this is crucial in order for me to understand how to best serve the artists that I work for. I need to know what they want and their vision so we can come up with a more collective vision for the song, or else there's going to be a really high likelihood that what I make is not going to be in line with what the artist wants. You need to spend actual time crafting out a concept of what you want to do in the song. What do the drums sound like? What kind of instruments are you using? How are you approaching the vocal production? What kind of vibe do you want? What's the big part of the song and what's the low part of the song? How are you going to approach dynamics? What's the arrangement going to look like? All these questions are just starting point questions, but too many producers are shooting before they even aim, and that is backwards. Take even 20 minutes to figure out a vision for what you want, and this will help make sure that when you get started, you're not moving in the wrong direction. And I know from having taught thousands of producers that most don't do this. Number 2, I've learned that having access to high quality sounds is one of the most important purchases you'll ever make. I do not know a single professional producer who has not heavily invested in sound libraries or sounds in general. Music is sound, so if you want great music, then you must have great sounds. This kind of seems obvious, but it's amazing how many producers are still working with stock sounds, all the while spending thousands on effects plugins and microphones and other gear that frankly does not make nearly as much of a difference as getting more professional quality sounds. Now, if you literally only record live elements, then you can take this with a little bit of a grain of salt, but the vast majority are still using virtual instruments. The first few years that I produced music, I was only using the Logic Pro stock sounds, and when I finally got my first client, I realized I needed to invest in some good sounds. So I took the money that I got from that project and I bought my first sound library ever, which was the Native Instruments Complete Ultimate Bundle. This was back on version 9 when it still got shipped on an actual physical hard drive and it wasn't just downloaded. How times have changed. That one purchase to this day is one of the best purchases I've ever made. And whenever I recommend gear, I always place buying professional quality sounds at the very top. I'm still using some of the same sounds that I used all the way back when I first got that sound library today. And you don't necessarily need to spend a ton of money here. There's so many good free libraries out there, but if you want to take this seriously, then you gotta take your sound seriously. And if you're one of those producers spending a lot of cash on plugins, but you don't have great sounds, you are wasting your money. And I take my own advice with this. I literally just downloaded over 700 gigabytes of new libraries a week ago because I have a lot of new music that I'm working on where I just need to get some new and updated sounds to work with. So I put my own money where my mouth is with this. Number 3 is the best producers tend to be the best musicians. I know that some of you are going to be offended by this, but I honestly don't really think of myself as a producer first and foremost. I'm a musician who produces music. The more you know about music and the more you understand that producing is ultimately a musical endeavor, the better off you'll be. I'm not saying that you need to go to school or get a degree like I did, but the reality is that the best producers are usually the best musicians. There's a reason that a lot of producers are former instrumentalists turned producers, and it's because producing music does require a high level of musicianship musicianship if you want to do it well. So what if you don't play an instrument or know music theory? Again, I'm not saying that you can't produce music. Of course you can cite loads of examples or go off talking about how Rick Rubin knows nothing about music, to which I also say he was surrounded entirely by people who did. But being a good musician isn't necessarily just playing an instrument. In many cases, when I work on projects, it's not about how well I play that makes the difference, but actually it has a lot more to do with my overarching creative vision, which we've already talked about, and executing a great vision in a way that leverages the technology, the tools, the musicians, and everything that I need to get the job done. The fact that I'm a professional level pianist and a trained composer, I would be lying if I said that didn't give me a major leg up as a producer. If you don't play an instrument or don't know music theory, my best advice truly is that you should learn some basic piano and learn some basic music theory to understand the relationship that notes and chords have with each other, because that information is absolutely invaluable when it comes to making great music as a producer. I'm using those tools and skills every single day. I've never met a producer who's a killer musician who regrets the time and effort it took for them to get to that point. I had this very conversation with my good friend Tommy Profit, who's a multi-platinum producer and artist, not too long ago, about how the most important skills a producer can have are oriented around musicianship, not the technology or plugins or software. So do whatever you can to improve your own musicianship, and I promise you will reap those benefits as a producer. And by the way, I just released a brand new free workshop where I go in detail on my producer framework, which is the process of how I produce music from start to finish. So you can sign up 100% for free with the link in the description or the pinned comment below. See you there. Number 4, I learned to stop producing music like a piano player. This might sound a bit strange, especially considering what I just got done talking about, but I think this will really help you if you play an instrument and produce music. When I was in high school, I had written this orchestral piece of music and I shared it with a composer to give me feedback on. And what he said to me was, "Nathan, you write like a pianist." And I was like, what does it even mean? And he showed me how all my string parts were written chordally. In other words, everything was just in a vertical line like a pianist would play. But that's not how string players would want to play. They want to have motion, they want to have movement, there's melody, there's counter melody. The cellos are doing one thing and the violin ones are doing something completely different. All of those things are impossible to do while playing the piano because there aren't enough fingers. But the orchestra does not have that limitation. I learned that when I make music as a composer and also as a producer, it's not my job to think like the instrumentalist that I am. I play the piano, but when I produce music, I need to take that hat off and put on the I'm a producer hat or I'm a composer hat to start thinking idiomatically around what the instruments do that I'm working with. Too many guitar players produce music in a way where it's so obvious that they're a guitar player because it's like you're not doing anything other than what a guitar player would do, which makes the song kind of sound lame, to be honest. As a producer, it's my job to serve the song. And in a lot of songs, I need to be able to do those guitar things and also be able to do those drum things. The reason a lot of producers have songs with really lame drum production is because they're stuck thinking like whatever they play and not thinking like a drummer. Now, what if you're not a drummer? Many of us are not drummers. How do you think like one? Well, that's where you either get a drummer to help you or you need to go to references and start learning how drums should sound and learn to start imitating that in your own music, which will help you learn to start thinking more like a drummer and less like a pianist or a guitarist or whatever you play. If I always made music through this lens of I'm a pianist, I literally would not have a career. It would not be possible. Being a producer is, like I've already said, being a musician, and more than that. I have to be the musician who understands how to leverage other instruments that I don't play and then make sure they still sound how they should and sound natural. So if you play an instrument, stop thinking about making music just as the instrumentalist that you are and put on that producer hat and start making music like the producer you are. This is where it's so helpful to get other musicians involved whenever possible, because you can ask them questions. Even now, when I do string sessions, which I do a lot of string sessions, I'm constantly asking questions during those sessions to make sure that I can do a better job the next time. I'll ask if I notated that in a way that made sense, or if there's a better way of doing something that I asked them to do, or I'll ask them about the difficulty level of what I had them play so I can know for the future if I can push them harder or if I need to dial it back a bit. The way you learn how to produce like this is usually starting by learning how to understand how each instrument works. Like, what do they like to do? What do they not like to do? What actually sounds the best? And learning everything that you can about whatever instrument you're working with to make it as idiomatic as possible. Number 5, I learned what I call the if you only had one more thing technique that I'm about to teach you. When you finish doing something in a production, like, you just finished doing a part, you just finished programming a specific thing you did, right? You're gonna find yourself at a fork in the road, which is what do you do next? What do you work on next? A lot of producers get analysis paralysis because they finish something and then they really don't know where to go next or what to do next. So they start doing tasks that are very often completely meaningless and it's not pushing the song forward. And this is where you can use my technique. Ask yourself this simple question. If I can only do one more thing and then I have to shut it down, what would make the biggest difference right now? And then go do that thing. It's such a simple question, and it's also so easy to just move on to unimportant things or mundane things that just don't matter. I am a firm believer in forward momentum. The moment I start feeling like I'm slowing down or if I'm getting stuck, I'm gonna move on to something I feel like is really important that I know for sure I can tackle right now. Because if I get stuck on stupid tasks that are not important, I feel like I lose all this momentum and it really just kills creativity. You can actually see this in my videos where I film making songs from scratch. I have to often catch myself and be like, man, what am I even doing right now? This thing doesn't even matter. And then I gotta move on to something that does matter. If you're early on in the process to learning to produce, this is especially true and especially important. I think those first 2 hours of making a song are absolutely crucial in making sure you start with forward progress and building up momentum. Yet what I found is most amateurs in those first 2 hours completely wasted away and end up seeing very little forward progress. And that's really frustrating when you find yourself in that position. The more you can move on and move forward, not only will you work faster, but you'll also most likely have better sounding music. Number 6, I learned that creative ruts are a real thing and what to do about it. If you ever feel like you're creatively uninspired or feeling like you're in a creative rut, you have to know that is not unique to you and it happens to basically everyone. If it hasn't happened to you, you either just haven't experienced it yet or you're a massive outlier and an anomaly. So for us mere mortals who do experience it, first off, you gotta acknowledge that it is okay. I think some of what makes it so hard is the feeling that it's not okay that we're creatively stuck. And this leads us to feeling guilty and honestly feeling like crap, which doesn't help anyone. So you gotta start by recognizing that it happens. In fact, I had this so bad when I was about 21 years old that I actually quit making music for 2 years. Yes, 2 years. I literally quit music and took a normal job for a couple years because I was so burned out and so tapped out. Now, I don't recommend that, by the way. That probably wasn't necessarily the right move, but it is what it is and it ultimately worked out. But this still happens today. I have times when I can feel it and I know what it is. And it's ultimately my brain telling me it's time to fill your cup. When you feel uninspired and uncreative, it's usually because we don't feel like we have something new to say or something new to explore. And this is your cue to fill that cup back up. When we're making creative things, we're essentially pouring out a cup. But we forget that that cup, it needs to get refilled at some point or it's gonna run dry. This is when I decide to go listen to new music I've never heard before, or go watch a TV show I've never seen, or read a book I've never read before. I actually find that reading books, or listening to audiobooks in my case, can be some of the most inspiring types of things to do. This is when you should be spending time around other people and having social interactions, because Lord knows I can be a hermit sometimes, and I know most producers are the same. Our body has a way of sometimes giving us no choice but to stop what we're doing and go experience some life. And so if you're trying to just force it and you're trying to say, I don't care that I'm experiencing this and I'm trying to plow through it, that's usually gonna make it worse. Our body is literally telling us it's time for you to go experience some life and go take in some other stuff to just like refill your cup. And this might take a couple days, it might even take a week or more, but I've learned in my career in the last few years especially that I need breaks and I need to go live some life, or else I'm absolutely gonna get burned out and I'm gonna feel like I wanna quit. Don't think that just because I have a career and do this professionally that I never experience those feelings. I have them at least a few times per year. Never forget that music is not life. Music is just a part of life. And if you want longevity in music, then don't forget to go live your life. Number 7, I learned that killer vocal production can honestly compensate for a below average instrumental track. I've seen a lot of productions from students where their instrumental is honestly very average, but the vocal production is just absolutely stellar. And to be completely honest, those songs usually could probably get released and no one would care. I know that sounds sacrilegious and sounds like I'm saying you should be putting out subpar music. That's not what I'm saying. I do think that you should try to make everything killer, but I'm just saying this to articulate how vocal production can radically help in overall production. If you have a great singer and you crush the vocal arrangement and you got amazing recordings and performances and a great vocal mix, I'm telling you, a great vocalist can literally carry a whole song on their shoulders. The song can't be trash, obviously, but if the instrumental is kind of just, you know, okay, then the vocals are gonna make up for it. The reason I say this is because the complete opposite is also true. If you have a killer instrumental with a subpar vocal production, that song is basically ruined. I cannot tell you how many times I've heard music from students where the instrumentals are really good, but the vocal performance is only average and the vocal mix is whack. That alone will make the average listener think the song isn't good, even though 90% of the track is awesome. Vocal production alone can make or break your whole song, so it's absolutely crucial that you get it right. Now, I'd love to hear which of these concepts helped you the most in the comments down below, and with that, I'll see you in the next one.